Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the benevolent universe and its importance in life and also its relation to causality. So to begin with, the benevolent universe premise for my understanding is basically the idea that the world is essentially good. It's a place where I can achieve my values. It's a place where the good gets rewarded and the evil is, or the bad is punished, basically. This is largely my understanding of it, and this is a really, really important premise to have. It relates very much to optimism and feeling that reality is essentially good. Like this feeling that this place that I'm in I'm comfortable in reality, essentially. Knowing that my actions will have consequences, and if I take good actions, they will have good consequences, and my rationality can adequately understand reality. This is a really, really beneficial way to think because, I mean, for one, it just makes you feel comfortable in reality, and for two, it makes you understand the effectiveness of your mind, truly understand that fact, that my mind is effective. It can discover truth, it can discover reality, and I can be happy in this world. That's also very key. And contrasting this with my former ideology, back when I was religious, this was not something I believed. I thought man was doomed to failure on this earth, that happiness was impossible. And that led me to a lot of sadness. I thought that there is this, I think as Pascal talks about, this like God-shaped hole in my heart that can never be filled, basically. And that's a really, really bad way to look at reality. You have to basically realize that happiness is out there. Happiness is something that is truly available to you in this world. And if you can do that, you'll be a lot more confident in the world, be a lot more confident in yourself, and feel a lot more optimistic about reality. And this is basically true regardless of, well, I mean, you have to be able to understand this ideology regardless of the people around you. There can be really negative people around you that are blocking you. However, with those people out of the way, there is always a chance for happiness. You can achieve happiness in this world. It's very obviously true, because all of your desires, everything that you need in life, is based on reality. You cannot desire something that is unreal. It has to be based on something real. So fulfillment of that desire would have to be something real as well, something from reality. And since your observations are the beginning of all of your understanding of things, these desires, these fulfillments, they have to start from reality. And you do abstract away, but you can't rationalistically create these abstractions of God and like unfulfillment, because those are gonna essentially pollute your mind and make the malevolent universe a very self-fulfilling prophecy. It makes it so that anything that you achieve, you feel like it's, oh no, this is not sufficient. Even if that would be sufficient if you better understood what is possible in reality. And also the malevolent universe makes you feel like you don't want to go out and do anything because none of it's worth it anyways. A lot of people ultimately have this premise deep down. They can like appear that they're pursuing things superficially on the surface, but deep down they don't feel this strong desire to achieve in the world because they don't feel like it's possible. This leads to a lot of this not feeling like it's possible leads to a lot of bad ideologies like Buddhism, where you just don't want to strive for anything, you don't want to achieve anything. Where you like, it's basically the idea of Buddhism is that you suppress all desire. That desire is worthless, and you're never going to be happy like that, because essentially what you're doing is viewing life as this, or viewing happiness as the absence of suffering, which is absolutely untrue, and it's going to lead you to pursuing zero. If you look at achievement of happiness in regards of like a negative 100 to 100 scale, a lot of people, they think life is essentially in the negatives, that you're going to be in the negatives forever, and you should simply try to achieve zero because life is largely suffering. This world is not a place where values can be achieved. But that'll only lead to you pursuing zero, pursuing death essentially, because that's what death is. Death is the zero. If life is just suffering, why not die? Die and the suffering is over. And this is like directly a philosophy of suicide. It tells you that you have to kill yourself, because if you're not going to achieve anything real in life, if all you can do is strive for zero, which is the end of suffering, then just die. Why would you continue living in that sense? Now, the objectivist view is different. It's this idea that, no, happiness is going above the zero and striving for 100, striving for what is actually going to fulfill your desires. And if your desires are based on reality, which is what they should be, otherwise you most likely have some subconscious premises that you need to check out, because this is part of understanding your desires. Your desires have a source, and that source is ultimately your subconscious, the things that you these premises that you've like integrated since you were a child, and basically held by constantly thinking certain things when you were a kid, and being told certain things and just accepting those things into your subconscious, and that essentially becomes automatized, and it gives you these certain desires. But it ultimately comes from your mind as well. You can correct these things. You can correct these desires essentially. They're real now. They're real. There's something that you actually desire. There's something that you have to deal with. But it's not as if everything that you desire is like set in stone and going to lead to this inevitable sadness because these are desires that can't be filled. No, if your desires are not based on reality, there's something that need to be corrected. There's something that you should try to fix and should try to make something that is achievable in this life, because everything that you could rationally desire is achievable in this life, because rationality is based on reality, and your desires also have to be based on reality. So that means essentially the benevolent universe premise is largely true. And there's also an extent to which the benevolent universe premise, it relates to causality, because for one, we live in a world of causality. Certain actions have inevitable consequences. If I take my phone here and just drop it, it's going to fall. And when it hits the table, it's going to make a noise, as you guys probably heard, and it was probably fairly loud, but it's all good. What else? Yeah, essentially cause and effect happens. Like if this were a table and push it, it's going to go this direction. That's an inevitable consequence of cause and effect. And this is basically true with all actions. All actions are causes that have effects essentially, and those effects are tangible. They're real. They're going to be essentially the same. If you do the same action, there's going to be the same response. Yeah, so that's definitely the case. Basically, the fact that causality is real essentially verifies the benevolent universe premise, because if certain actions have certain outcomes, that means that the actions that you take in life that are for your own happiness will lead to your own happiness. That lead to, or things where you try to fulfill your desires, those things will lead to the fulfillment of your desires if you take the proper actions. So essentially, this means if you take the proper actions in life, this is true because of causality. If you take the actions that lead to your happiness, you will be happy. It seems really obvious, but this is just a fact that comes from causality. And causality is really obvious because you observe it constantly. And those actions are obviously possible because what you desire has to be based on reality, has to be real, has to be rational. That was what I was talking about earlier. And causality relates to this in the fact that the universe is causal means that if you take these actions, these actions, they'll lead to your happiness. If you take these other actions, they'll lead to your sadness. And this means that basically the universe is understandable and your actions have set effects. You can know the effect of your actions before you take them. Maybe not entirely. Maybe you don't have the proper knowledge at the time. Maybe you have some irrational thoughts in your head. But if you take certain actions have certain consequences, and this fact leads to the benevolent, or is connected to the benevolent universe premise. You have to integrate that on your own. There's a lot of looking at reality that has to be done. You have to what's the word? Induce it on your own, basically from reality. You can't just like start with causality and just like deductively prove the benevolent universe. They're connected. They're connected in the fact that, like what I was talking about in this video, the fact that causality exists leads to the benevolent universe premise also existing. They're very connected in that sense because all parts of reality are integrated, but they're not necessary. Like they're not causal of each other. Causality doesn't cause the benevolent universe. They're somewhat independent of each other. I'm not explaining this very well, I don't think, but I'm trying to point essentially to Peikoff's understanding objectivism, the induction course, or the course where he's like I think it's called objectivism through induction or something. Not understanding objectivism, that's a different course. Objectivism through induction. But essentially what I was trying to talk about here with causality and the benevolent universe is the fact that things are causal is related to the benevolent universe because the benevolent universe relies on the fact that your actions that'll lead to positive ends, or that are intended for positive ends, or rationally intended for positive ends, will lead to positive ends. And this is very much tied to the benevolent universe premise because in the benevolent universe premise, it's basically says that you can achieve happiness and that your certain actions will have your positive actions will have positive results. It's not some whimsical universe where you can do all the right things, and then something will just destroy you, essentially. That's possible, although not really. There's the possibility for, like, really bad things to happen, I guess, but that's not the rule of life. There's a possible for, like, some random accident to happen, for you to die in some car accident today by no fault of your own. But that's so irrelevant. It's so not the rule of life. Because life is not essentially whimsical. It's not essentially suffering. There's a lot more to it regarding that. It's not essentially those things. It is somewhere where your actions will have certain consequences, and those consequences can be positive if you take the right actions. And it's related to causality in the sense that certain actions have certain consequences. Yeah, I think that is everything I had to say for today. So yeah, I think that's all I had to say for today. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Peace.